Welcome back, you night owls. Tonight we're pulling back the heavy iron-barred curtains on one of the darkest corners of the Victorian era, the asylum. We're not just looking in from the outside, we're stepping through the front door, feeling the damp chill on your skin and hearing the distant muffled wails that echo down the long, silent corridors. Tonight, your reality shifts. Your name, your life, your very sanity are about to be stripped away, replaced by a number and a diagnosis you don't understand. This is a journey you probably won't survive, at least not in the way you began it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you're listening, drop a comment with your location and local time so we know who's with us on this eerie ride. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The carriage jolts to a stop, the sudden silence heavier than the rain-slicked cobblestones. You're told to get out and your legs feel like they belong to someone else, stiff and uncooperative. The air bites with a peculiar metallic tang, a scent you'll soon come to recognise as a mix of disinfectant, unwashed bodies, and despair. Before you stands a building that seems to defy the very landscape, a massive, brooding edifice of dark brick and unadorned stone. It's not just a hospital, it's a fortress. A prison designed to keep things in, not just to keep them safe. Tiny, high-set windows, no larger than a man's head, are barred from the inside, each one a single, unblinking eye staring back at you. You're pushed forward by a burly attendant, his gruff demeanour a sharp contrast to the polite men who brought you here. His face is a roadmap of scowls, and he carries a ring of heavy iron keys that clink with every step, a macabre soundtrack to your arrival. The main door groans open, revealing a cavernous hall. The air inside is still and musty, heavy with the weight of decades. It smells of boiled cabbage and carbolic acid, a smell that will forever be burned into your memory. This is your new home. This is the Victorian Asylum. In the flickering gaslight, you see a jumble of figures, some shuffling aimlessly, some rocking back and forth in a corner, and others staring directly at you with an unnerving, vacant intensity. They're dressed in coarse grey uniforms, the kind of shapeless sackcloth that erases all individuality. One woman sits on the floor, meticulously arranging a pile of invisible thread, her lips moving in a silent, urgent conversation with herself. Another man stands rigidly by the wall, holding a broom as if it were a sceptre, his eyes wide with a fear so profound it has become a kind of permanent, petrified mask. This isn't the quiet, dignified place you might have imagined from the pamphlet your family was shown. It's a living, breathing testament to human suffering, a theatre of the absurd where the lines between actor and audience are hopelessly blurred. A nurse, a woman with a face as hard and unyielding as a porcelain doll, approaches you. Her starched white uniform is spotless, a stark contrast to the general squalor. She doesn't introduce herself or offer a kind word. Instead, she simply takes your arm in a firm, no-nonsense grip and begins the admission process. You are led to a small, sterile office, where a portly man with a high, stiff collar sits behind a heavy oak desk, a grim ledger open before him. This is the superintendent, the all-powerful overseer of your new world. He looks at you not as a person, but as a problem to be solved, a curious specimen to be categorized and filed away. He asks you a series of rapid-fire questions, not pausing for your full answers. Your name, your age, your alleged symptoms. He scribbles furiously with a quill pen, its scratching noise the only sound besides the distant moans from the wards. The medical history you offer is barely listened to. He seems to have already made up his mind. A curious little tidbit about the history of this place. Many early asylum superintendents were not trained medical doctors in the modern sense. Some were simply businessmen or philanthropists with an interest in social reform, and a lot of the initial intake process was based on their own personal and often unscientific observations. You're just another name to be entered into the ledger. The superintendent asks you about your family, and you feel a sharp pang of betrayal. You imagine them, at this very moment, sipping tea in their comfortable parlour, perhaps believing they've done what's best for you. Historians still argue whether Victorian families truly believed they were helping their loved ones by committing them, or if it was more a matter of social convenience, a way to hide inconvenient eccentricities or rebellious spirits away from public scrutiny. For you, the reason doesn't matter. The outcome is the same. You are here, and they are not. As your meagre belongings are taken away, your pockets are emptied. A single silver locket containing a miniature portrait of your mother is slipped into your hand. The nurse snaps it away. No trinkets, she says flatly. They can be used for self-harm. She hands you a coarse grey gown and a pair of hard leather slippers. Your own clothes are bundled up and taken away. You're no longer yourself. You're no longer someone's child or friend or lover. You're now just a patient, stripped of your identity, ready to be folded into the institutional machine. As you're led away, you catch a glimpse of your reflection in a polished brass plate on the wall. Your face is pale, your eyes wide with disbelief and horror. The person you see looks like a stranger. The person you see is no longer you. This isn't just a physical journey, it's a psychic one. And the destination is a place of profound loneliness. You're brought to your new room, a small cell-like space with a single iron bed frame bolted to the floor. The mattress is a thin sack of straw, and the only other furniture is a small chipped ceramic pot in the corner. The walls are a grim institutional beige, and the air is heavy with the scent of age and confinement. The door is heavy, solid wood, and it has no handle on the inside. You are locked in. The click of the bolt turning feels final, a punctuation mark on the end of your old life. You are a Victorian asylum patient now, and your story has just begun. The bolt slides open, and the door groans inward, a single square of blinding light hitting your eyes. You've been in the dark for what feels like an eternity, though in reality it was only a few hours. The smell of disinfectant and boiling starch is even more potent now. A stern-faced nurse, the same one who took your locket, stands in the doorway. Up now, the doctor will see you. Her voice is a flat, uninflected monotone, devoid of warmth or urgency. There's no room for argument or delay. You stumble out of the cell, your legs still weak from the journey and the shock, and are led down a long, echoing corridor. The floors are slick with something, and the walls are a miserable peeling paint, a colour somewhere between swamp water and old dust. Distant guttural sounds, half moans and half shouts, echo from behind other locked doors. It's a symphony of madness, and you are its newest member. You are brought to a small room, but this one is different. It is disturbingly clean, almost surgical in its starkness. A small table is set in the centre, and on it a collection of strange cold instruments gleams under the gaslight. A heavy metal mallet, a pair of calipers, and a stethoscope. A man sits at a small desk, his back to you. He wears a dark tweed suit and has a shock of greying hair that seems to have a life of its own. This is the resident physician, the man who will decide what is wrong with you and how you will be fixed. He turns, and his face is a mask of weary detachment. He looks at you with the dispassionate curiosity of a man studying a particularly vexing insect. He doesn't ask you how you feel, or if you're comfortable. Instead, he launches into a series of questions that feel less like an inquiry and more like an interrogation. Tell me your name. Why do you believe you're here? Are you in possession of your faculties? The questions are designed to catch you out, to reveal the truth behind your supposed malady. You try to explain, to reason with him, but your words feel hollow, like they're falling into a vast, unfillable emptiness. He scribbles in a notepad, his brow furrowed in concentration. He's not listening to your answers. He's looking for the cracks, for the moments when your words don't align with his preconceived notions. A mainstream historical fact you're living right now is that the diagnosis of insanity in the Victorian era was incredibly subjective. There were no standardized diagnostic criteria like we have today. A person could be committed for anything from religious enthusiasm to novel reading. The examination becomes more and more invasive. He shines a bright light into your eyes, scrutinizing your pupils for any sign of dilation. He checks your pulse, your reflexes, and even asks you to hold out your hands to check for tremors. He listens to your heart with his stethoscope, the cold metal disc a shock against your skin. You feel like a piece of meat on a butcher's block, not a human being. The doctor's fingers probe at your scalp, looking for phrenological signs of mental imbalance. This is where it gets a little quirky. A peculiar belief of the time, known as phrenology, suggested that a person's personality and mental state could be determined by the shape and bumps on their skull. The more asymmetrical or lumpy your head, the more prone you were to certain disorders. It's an almost unbelievably strange tidbit, but many doctors of the era took it very seriously, even going so far as to create elaborate diagrams of the head with different faculties mapped out. It feels ridiculous and humiliating, and you can't help but wonder if this man's entire diagnosis will be based on the shape of your head. After the physical part of the exam, he moves to the psychological. He asks you a series of nonsensical questions. If a horse and a dog were to walk into a forest, which one would reach the other side first? Is it true that the sun is made of cheese? Your attempts to answer logically are met with a shake of his head. You're trying to pass a test where the questions have no right answers, a test designed only to prove that you are unfit. You can't help but laugh, a short, nervous bark of a sound. A dog and a horse? I suppose the one that was faster, you say, a hint of sarcasm in your voice. He looks up from his notepad, a flicker of something in his eyes. Not anger, but a kind of smug satisfaction. Laughing at the question, he mutters to himself. He scribbles a note in the ledger under your name. Mariah is easily amused by the illogical. The irony is so thick you could carve it with a knife. He then pulls a strange metal contraption from a drawer. It's a thin, gleaming strip of steel, and it's cold to the touch. He places it on your tongue. This is a Fitch-Price reflex tester, he says, a small smile on his face. It's a new invention. It measures the intensity of your mental reflexes. The device, of course, is a complete fabrication. He's making it up as he goes along, a little bit of theatre to prove his authority. This is a common theme of the time. A lot of the scientific equipment used in asylums was more about appearing legitimate than about actually doing anything useful. You feel the absurdity of the situation, the terrible, grim humour of it all. You, an able-bodied, sane person, are being diagnosed with madness by a man who seems to be operating in his own little world. Finally, the examination is over. He sits back in his chair, a look of profound satisfaction on his face. Yes, he says, as if he's solved a difficult puzzle. It is as I suspected. Hysteria with pronounced melancholic tendencies. The symptoms are textbook. The words are a foreign language to you. Hysteria, melancholic. You're not sure what they mean, but the words feel like a death sentence. Historians still argue whether these diagnoses were genuinely believed by doctors, or if they were merely convenient labels to justify locking people away for social or familial reasons. For you, the difference is moot. The verdict is in, and it is not good. The nurse from before returns and takes your arm. She leads you back down the long corridor, away from the sterile, deceptive quiet of the examination room and back into the cacophony of the ward. The sounds are louder now, more visceral. You hear the rattling of chains, the low, keening cries of someone lost in their own world. You're one of them now. You have a name, a diagnosis, and a place here. But you no longer have a life. You have a purpose now, to be treated, to be cured. You remember the look in the doctor's eyes, a kind of paternal, cold assurance. He truly believes he can fix you. You, however, are beginning to wonder if there is anything left to fix. The asylum has already begun its work, and it is a work of erasure. The nurse deposits you in a large open ward. The room is a stark, depressing rectangle, lined with rows of identical iron beds, each one with the same lumpy straw mattress you have in your own cell. The air is thick with a cloying scent you can't quite place, a mixture of unwashed bodies, stale food, and the heavy smell of institutional despair. The light from a single high window is weak and watery, casting long, mournful shadows on the floor. It's here you're introduced to your new life, your new rhythm, the unyielding march of the asylum's clock. The first thing you learn is the schedule. It is a thing of absolute unblinking rigidity. The day begins not with the gentle rays of the sun, but with a sudden jarring clang of a bell at precisely 5 in the morning. A brusque, indifferent attendant sweeps through the ward, a lantern held aloft. Up! Up now, he barks, his voice a coarse grate against the morning silence. There is no time for lingering, no room for sleepiness. You're expected to be out of bed and dressed in your coarse uniform within minutes. This isn't just about hygiene, it's about control. It's about stripping you of your personal will, of your ability to choose even the smallest thing, like when to wake up. Next is the washroom. It's a terrifying communal experience. There are no private stalls, just a long trough of cold water and a few rough brushes. You're expected to wash quickly and efficiently under the watchful, judging eyes of the attendants. The water is frigid, a shocking slap to your face and hands, but there's no time to complain. The attendants are impatient, their hands quick to shove you along if you hesitate for even a second. It's an act of public humiliation, a way of proving that your body is no longer your own, but the property of the asylum. A rather unsettling fact is that the bathing routines in these places were often based more on moral ideas of cleanliness and punishment than on actual health and hygiene. Some patients were only bathed once a month. Others were dunked in freezing water as a form of shock therapy, all in the name of moral purification. Breakfast follows, a bleak affair of watery gruel and stale bread. It's served in a large communal dining hall where you're seated at long bare tables. The meal is eaten in silence, a rule enforced by the ever-present attendants. Any noise, any attempt at conversation is met with a swift, often brutal correction. The food, you discover, is designed to be nothing more than basic sustenance. It is tasteless, textureless, and often smells vaguely of what you can only describe as old sorrows. There's a certain grim irony to it, a little grim humour, if you will. You're supposed to be a human being, but you're being fed like livestock, and you can't help but wonder if the gruel is made of the same straw as your mattress. After breakfast, the labour begins. This is the cornerstone of the Victorian Asylums philosophy. The belief was that physical work, what they called occupational therapy, was not only a way to keep patients occupied and out of trouble, but was also a fundamental component of the cure. You are given a broom and a pail of water and tasked with scrubbing the floors. The work is endless and back-breaking. The stone floors are vast and the dirt seems to cling to them with a stubborn, malevolent will. The attendants patrol the halls, their eyes sharp, looking for anyone who's not working hard enough. You work until your hands are raw and your back aches with a dull, throbbing pain. The work is not just to keep you busy, it is to punish you, to drain you of your energy, to make you too tired to think, to question, to resist. There's a curious tidbit about this labour system. Many asylums, especially the larger state-run ones, were almost entirely self-sufficient thanks to the unpaid labour of their patients. Patients would tend vast gardens, raise livestock, and even build new wings for the asylum, all for free. In a way, they were both the products and the producers of their own confinement. Historians still argue whether this was a genuinely therapeutic model or simply a cost-saving measure for institutions that were chronically underfunded. For you, the answer is irrelevant. Your hands are sore, your muscles scream, and the day stretches out before you, an endless expanse of scrubbing, sweeping, and polishing. The afternoon mirrors the morning, more labour, more monotonous tasks. You're now in a laundry room, your hands submerged in a cauldron of boiling soapy water, scrubbing coarse grey linens. The heat is stifling, the air thick with steam, and the smell of harsh lye stings your nostrils. You see the other patients, their faces drawn and pale, their eyes fixed on their work with a frightening empty concentration. Some hum to themselves, others rock back and forth, but they all work. The rhythm of the work is a kind of shared, silent language. The squeak of a broom, the rhythmic slap of a wet cloth, the thud of a folded sheet. It is a language you are now fluent in, whether you like it or not. Lunch is another meagre, silent meal. The evening brings more chores, and then, finally, the long dragging hours of free time before the 9 o'clock bell that signals lights out. Free time is a misnomer. There is no freedom here. You're confined to the ward, watched at all times. You can sit on your bed, but you cannot talk. You can stare at the wall, but you cannot think. You're supposed to be at rest, but your mind is a cage full of screaming, rattling birds. A particularly cruel form of punishment for minor infractions is the quiet room, a small padded cell where a patient is locked away for hours or even days. The darkness, the isolation, the sheer nothingness of it is meant to break your will. You saw one of the attendants threaten a woman with it earlier, and her face went slack with a terror so profound it made your stomach clench. Finally the bell rings. You are locked back in your cell. The bolt slides home with a definitive final-sounding click. You lie on your lumpy straw mattress, staring up at the dark, uneven ceiling. Your body is exhausted, but your mind is wide awake, replaying the day's grim routine. You wonder how long you can last like this, how long before the monotony wears down your sanity, leaving you as empty and silent as the patients you see in the halls. The asylum's routine isn't just a schedule, it's a weapon designed to break you, to strip you of everything that makes you, well, you. And you are beginning to feel it working. The days bleed into each other, a monochrome blur of gruel, labour, and a constant low-level thrum of fear. You learn to walk with your head down, to keep your eyes fixed on the floor, to become as invisible as possible. The goal isn't to be cured, it's to survive. You see what happens to those who don't. A woman in the next bed, prone to bouts of frenzied weeping, is taken away one afternoon, and she returns an hour later, her eyes wide and blank, her arms tied tightly to her sides. You've heard of it, of course, the straitjacket, a legendary piece of asylum folklore, but seeing it on a person, seeing the way it erases there to be human, is something else entirely. It's a garment of pure, unyielding control. The opportunity for you to experience this particular horror arrives on a surprisingly normal morning. You're in the laundry room, scrubbing a sheet until your knuckles are raw, when a small, frightened girl, no more than 13 or 14, begins to whimper. She's been quiet for weeks, but today something has broken. Her whimpering turns into a soft, strangled crying, and then to full-blown sobs. Her hands, red and chapped from the lye soap, go to her face. Immediately an attendant is on her, his face a mask of irritation. He grabs her by the shoulders and shakes her. "Enough of that noise!" Quiet now. The girl, startled and terrified, screams. It's a sound that seems to tear the very air, a high, panicked shriek. The attendant's frustration turns to anger. He shoves her, and she stumbles backward, knocking over a pail of water. Suddenly, chaos erupts. The other patients, their nerves already stretched thin, begin to stir. Some begin to wail in sympathy, others to gibber incoherently. The attendant's face goes crimson. "Madness! All of you! A contagion of madness!" he bellows. He is suddenly on you, his hand a vice on your arm. You haven't made a sound, haven't moved, but your proximity to the girl is enough. "You were encouraging her, weren't you? Aiding in this disruption," he snarls. You try to protest, but your words are lost in the cacophony. He drags you out of the laundry room and down the long, echoing corridor. You're a sack of potatoes in his grip, your feet scraping on the cold stone floor. He takes you to a small, isolated room, a room you've heard whispered about in the dark corners of the ward. It's a restraint room, a place where control is absolute. He doesn't say a word. He simply pulls a heavy garment from a hook on the wall. It's made of thick canvas, and it looks like a coat without sleeves. 2 long, sturdy straps hang from the front. This is the fabled straitjacket. He forces your arms into the openings, the canvas rough against your skin. You struggle, but his strength is overwhelming. He pulls your arms behind your back and crosses the long straps, lacing them through metal rings and pulling them tight, so tight you can feel your bones grinding. The straps are then tied to a post on the wall so you can't move, can't even sit. You're a statue of canvas and terror. The feeling is one of complete and total powerlessness. You can't scratch your nose, you can't wipe the tear from your eye, you can't even adjust your position to alleviate the dull ache in your shoulders. It's a physical manifestation of your psychological state, a garment of control that says, your body is not your own, your will is not your own. Historians still argue about the true purpose of the straitjacket. Was it a humane way to prevent patients from harming themselves or others, as the asylums claimed? Or was it a tool of convenience and punishment for overworked staff who needed to enforce order with minimal effort? For you, the answer is clear. It's a cage. A rather quirky tidbit about the straitjacket is that some designs were incredibly complex, with intricate systems of straps and buckles. A famous version, the camisole de force, had so many straps that it took 2 attendants to properly fasten it, making the process of being restrained a truly degrading spectacle. The one you're in feels simple but no less terrifying. The pressure is a constant nagging presence, a low-grade pain that spreads from your shoulders to your chest. You try to take a deep breath, but the canvas presses in on your ribs, making it difficult. You can hear your own ragged breathing, a small, pathetic sound in the suffocating silence. You are left alone in the room. The door is closed and locked. You are a silent sentinel, a prisoner within a prisoner. The hours stretch on, an eternity of immobility and discomfort. You try to distract yourself by thinking of home, of a warm fire, of the smell of fresh bread, of anything to escape the cold, hard reality of your present. But the memories are like ghosts, indistinct and fading. The asylum is doing its work. It's erasing your past, your memories, your very sense of self. This is a mainstream historical fact. The use of physical restraints, from straitjackets to chains, was a common practice in Victorian asylums. It was seen as a way to manage unruly or dangerous patients, a practical solution to a complex problem. Of course, the definition of dangerous could be incredibly broad, as you've just discovered. A simple cry for help, an act of fear, can be interpreted as a threat, and the punishment is swift and total. It's a system built on arbitrary rules and absolute power, a system that thrives on fear and submission. A little grim humour, if you can find it. It's not just a straitjacket, it's a straitjacket and a life jacket, designed to save you from drowning in your own despair by simply not letting you move. Finally, after what feels like a geological epoch, the door creaks open. The attendant is back. He doesn't look at you, doesn't offer a word of apology. He simply unfastens the straps, his movements efficient and practiced. As he releases you, your arms drop to your sides, a heavy dead weight. You try to move them, but the muscles are stiff and unresponsive. The blood rushes back to your fingertips in a painful, stinging wave. He leads you back to the ward where the other patients give you a wide berth. Their eyes full of a new sad understanding. You are marked. You are one of them now. You know the true meaning of the straitjacket, the way it not only binds your body but shatters your spirit. And you can't help but wonder what will come next. The day after your stint in the straitjacket, your body still aches with a bone-deep weariness, and your mind feels like a bruised piece of fruit. You've learned that resistance, even the smallest show of it, is met with an immediate terrifying response. So when the same attendant from yesterday comes to your bed, his face a bland mask of indifference, and says, "The doctor wants to try something new with you," you simply nod, your heart a frantic drum against your ribs. You don't ask what this something new is. You just follow him, your legs feeling like lead. He leads you down a new, unfamiliar corridor, one that is colder and damper than the rest of the asylum. The air here smells of damp plaster and rust. The sounds are different too, not the moans and cries of the patients, but the rhythmic gurgle of water, a low, ominous sound that seems to come from all directions. The corridor opens into a large, tiled room that looks like a cross between a Roman bathhouse and a butcher's shop. There are large, deep tubs lining the walls, and a network of brass pipes, some of them hissing with steam, runs along the ceiling. You see other patients, some of them in the tubs, their faces pale and their bodies still. This, you realise with a sinking horror, is where they perform hydrotherapy. A rather mainstream historical fact is that hydrotherapy was a common and popular treatment in Victorian asylums. It was believed that the application of water, either hot or cold, could have a profound effect on the mind and body. The theory was that it could either calm agitated patients or conversely stimulate those who were withdrawn or melancholic. It was a supposedly scientific approach to madness, but the reality, as you are about to discover, was a world away from the sterile, detached theory. The attendant instructs you to strip. You hesitate, but a sharp look from him is enough to convince you. You are given a coarse linen wrap and told to get into the nearest tub. The water is ice cold, so cold it's a physical shock to your system. You gasp and the attendant pushes you down, forcing you to submerge yourself. The frigid water is a slap in the face, a full-body jolt that makes your teeth chatter and your skin prickle with goosebumps. It is a shock, a profound and horrifying one, but it is not therapeutic. It is punishment. The attendant then turns a large brass valve and a jet of high-pressure water sprays from a pipe near the tub, hitting you on the chest. It's not a gentle stream. It's a powerful, punishing spray that feels like a punch. He moves the jet around, from your chest to your stomach to your legs, each blast a new, stinging blow. You try to move away, but the tub is too narrow, the water too powerful. You can't help but wonder if this is the calming effect they were talking about. This is a torture chamber disguised as a hospital room. A quirky tidbit about this type of hydrotherapy, also known as the Scotch douche, is that it was often used as a kind of a moral lesson. The idea was that the shock and pain would snap the patient out of their madness, much like a sharp slap to the face. Doctors would stand on a raised platform, a little like a conductor's podium, and orchestrate the blasts of water, a grim maestro conducting a symphony of pain. It was a bizarre, almost theatrical display of power and control. After what feels like an eternity, the attendant turns off the water. Your body is trembling uncontrollably, and your skin is a mottled shade of blue and red. He helps you out of the tub and wraps you in a cold, rough blanket. You are then led to another tub, this one filled with scalding hot water. The heat is as much of a shock as the cold was, a sudden searing pain that makes you want to scream. You are submerged again, your skin turning a bright, angry red. The attendant says something about drawing out the toxins of the mind, but you know it's just another form of torment. You look around the room at the other patients, at the still, silent figures in their tubs. Some of them are staring blankly at the wall, their eyes vacant. Others are weeping silently, their tears mixing with the water. You see a woman in a large canvas-covered tub. The attendant tells you that this is the continuous bath, where patients were kept in warm water for hours or even days at a time. The canvas cover, with just a hole for their head, was meant to keep them from getting out. It was a way of isolating them, of keeping them in a state of sensory deprivation, all in the name of therapy. Historians still argue whether these hydrotherapy treatments were ever truly believed to be effective, or if they were just another way to subdue and control patients without resorting to more obvious physical violence. It's a debate you're not in a position to weigh in on, but you know which side you're on. The pain is real, the humiliation is real, and the fear is real. There is nothing about this that feels like healing. There is only a profound sense of loss, a loss of your dignity, your autonomy, your very self. After what feels like a lifetime of alternating between cold and hot, the ordeal is over. You are dried off and given your clothes back. As you're led back to the ward, you feel strangely numb, your body a strange mixture of warmth and chill. The experience has left a mark, not a visible one, but a deep psychic bruise. You realise that the asylum is not a place of healing, it is a place of systematic destruction. It strips you down, piece by piece, until there is nothing left. It takes your clothes, your belongings, your privacy, your will, and now it has taken your bodily comfort. What will be next? You look at the other patients in the ward, their vacant, defeated eyes. You wonder if this is what happens when they run out of things to take from you. You look down at your hands. They are still chapped and raw, a reminder of the labour, a small piece of yourself that hasn't been erased yet. You're an empty vessel, waiting to be filled with the asylum's peculiar brand of suffering. The routine of pain and monotony has become a kind of background hum, a static you've learned to live with. Your body is a map of small aches and your mind is a murky pond, but you're still here. You've survived the straitjacket and the water, and you find a grim, dark kind of pride in that. But a new word is whispered in the corridors, a word that makes the other patient's eyes go wide with a quiet, profound dread. The jolt. You've seen a handful of patients taken away and returned later, their faces slack and their memories fractured, and you've pieced together the fragments of what they've tried to tell you in the whispered dark of the ward. Your name is called one morning, and the familiar knot of dread tightens in your stomach. The same attendant from before, the one who seems to specialise in your torment, beckons you. The doctor wants to try something more. Direct, he says, his voice a low rumble. You're led back to that sterile room you remember, the one with the desk and the ledger. But today the room has been rearranged. The desk has been pushed to one side, and in its place is a strange, menacing contraption. It's a box of polished wood with 2 gleaming brass terminals and a series of dials and switches. Wires run from it to 2 small metal plates attached to a leather strap. This, you realise with a cold shock, is the jolt. A mainstream historical fact you're about to experience is that early forms of electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT, were indeed used in Victorian asylums. It was a crude and terrifying process, far removed from the modern controlled procedure. The belief was that by inducing a seizure, the imbalance in the brain that was causing the madness could be reset, much like rebooting a faulty machine. It was a blunt, powerful tool, and the doctors who used it had little understanding of what they were actually doing. For a little dark humour, you can't help but think of it as a sort of mechanical exorcism, but instead of holy water they're using electricity. The doctor, the one who gave you the diagnosis, is there, his face as impassive as ever. He gestures for you to sit in a hard wooden chair. He doesn't offer any explanation or comfort. He simply wraps the leather strap with the metal plates around your head. The leather smells of old sweat and disinfectant. The plates, you realise, are meant to be placed on either side of your temples. A quirky tidbit about these early ECT devices is that they were often built by the doctors themselves, based on their own incomplete understanding of electricity. There was no standardised dosage, no regulated procedure. It was often a matter of guesswork, a cruel experiment in a live sentient being. He flips a switch, and the box begins to hum, a low, ominous sound that vibrates through the room. The dials on the box flicker to life. He looks at you, his eyes a mix of clinical interest and a strange detached curiosity, like a child playing with a new and dangerous toy. He says, "This may feel unpleasant." That is a monumental understatement. The next moment is a violent, blinding storm of sensation. A jolt of pure, raw electricity rips through your head. Your muscles seize up and your body arches backward in the chair, a puppet with severed strings. You feel a profound, staggering pain, a fire that courses through your brain, burning away your thoughts, your memories, your very sense of self. The world becomes a kaleidoscope of light and noise, a screaming, flashing chaos. You're no longer in the room, no longer in the asylum. You're in a storm of your own making, and there is no escape. The smell of burning hair fills the room, and you realise with a terrible slow-motion awareness that it is your own. The jolt is over as quickly as it began. Your body collapses back into the chair, your muscles trembling uncontrollably. Your head throbs with a dull, nauseating pain. You feel strangely empty, as if the lightning has not just coursed through you, but has also hollowed you out. The doctor checks your pulse and scribbles in his notebook. He seems satisfied. He looks at you and says, "That should help with the agitation. We'll try a few more sessions to be sure." Historians still argue whether the doctors who performed these procedures were well-intentioned but misguided, or if they were simply experimenting on a vulnerable population with no accountability. It's a question you are living through in the most brutal way possible. The experience has left you with a deep, profound sense of violation. Your body feels like a stranger's, a broken machine that no longer works properly. Your mind, which was once so clear and sharp, is now a fog of half-remembered words and blurred images. You try to remember a happy memory, a simple one, like the taste of your favourite cake, but the memory is gone, wiped clean by the jolt. You are helped to your feet and led back to the ward. The other patients look at you with a new, sad understanding. You are one of them now, one of the ones who has been fixed. The term feels like a kind of grim joke. You feel more broken than ever before. You see a woman staring at the wall, humming a tune you don't recognise. She seems to be in a world of her own, a world the asylum has created for her. You can't help but wonder if that's what's in store for you. A quiet, empty existence. Your mind a blank slate waiting to be filled with the asylum's rules and routines. You're a ghost, not a human being. The asylum hasn't cured you. It has begun the slow, methodical process of erasing you, and the jolt was the biggest eraser of them all. The jolt has left you with a profound and terrifying new reality. You have a constant dull ache behind your eyes, and your short-term memory is a sieve. You find yourself forgetting things, the names of the attendants, the number of beds in the ward, what you had for breakfast an hour ago. It's a cruel kind of freedom, this new fog of the mind. It makes the days a little easier to bear, as they blur into a seamless, indistinguishable mass. But it also makes you fear that you're losing more than just your memory. You're losing yourself. The doctor seems pleased with your progress. He says you are more compliant, less agitated. The words feel like a new, even more terrifying sentence. One afternoon you're summoned to the superintendent's office, a place you've been in only once before, on the day of your admission. The room is the same, gloomy, masculine and oppressive. The portly superintendent sits behind his desk, and with him is the doctor who's been treating you. Their faces are grim, serious, as if they are discussing a matter of great national importance. The superintendent gestures to the chair opposite his desk, and you sit. He doesn't look at you, he looks at the doctor. "The patient's condition, doctor. What is your prognosis?" The doctor clears his throat. "Her hysteria and melancholic tendencies, while tempered by the ECT, are still present. She's not yet cured." He uses the word cured like a hammer, a heavy final word. The superintendent nods, his gaze still fixed on the doctor. He then looks at a large leather-bound volume on his desk. This is the ledger you saw on your first day. You realise with a sudden sinking dread that this is where your fate is being decided. The doctor then explains what he calls a new and promising procedure. He mentions the work of a man named Agas Moniz, and his use of a surgical procedure to sever the connection between the frontal lobes and the rest of the brain. He calls it a lobotomy. A mainstream historical fact is that the prefrontal lobotomy was a shockingly common procedure in the mid-20th century, though its roots trace back to the theories and experiments of the late Victorian and Edwardian eras. The idea was that by cutting the connections in the brain's frontal lobe, the source of a patient's emotional distress could be cut away, leaving them placid and manageable. It was a seemingly perfect solution for the asylums, which were overflowing with incurable patients. The doctor's description is terrifyingly clinical, a quiet horror delivered in a monotone voice. He describes how a tool, a sharp, long instrument called a leucotum, would be inserted through the top of the eye socket and into the brain. He talks about swishing it around to cut the desired connections. You don't understand the science, but you understand the violence of it. The words paint a gruesome picture in your mind, a picture of a blade being pushed into your head, of something being cut and destroyed forever. A quirky tidbit that strikes you with a certain bleak irony is that the inventor of this procedure, Moniz, would later win the Nobel Prize for his work. It was hailed as a revolutionary medical advance, a breakthrough in the treatment of mental illness. You can't help but wonder if the members of the Nobel Committee ever saw a patient after the procedure. Did they see the vacant stares, the loss of personality, the quiet, obedient shells that were left behind? The superintendent finally looks at you. His eyes are not cruel, not angry. They are simply empty. It is a last resort, of course, he says, his voice a low rumble, but it is a permanent one. No more weeping, no more agitation. A quiet life, a good life. He says these words as if they are a kindness, a grand gift he is offering you. You want to scream, to shout, to tell them that you would rather be weeping, that you would rather be agitated, that you would rather be anything than a blank slate. But the terror paralyzes you. Your throat is a dry, tight knot, and no sound comes out. Historians still argue whether the doctors and superintendents who performed these lobotomies genuinely believed they were helping their patients, or if the procedure was just a convenient way to reduce the number of difficult cases and maintain order in the increasingly crowded asylums. For you, the debate is a matter of life and death, of the preservation of your very soul. You realize that your life is not a matter of curing your madness, but a matter of managing it, of making you as unobtrusive as possible. The superintendent stands up, a gesture of finality. He looks at you and says, "We will give you a few days to consider our recommendation." It is not mandatory, but it is strongly advised. He uses the word advised as a threat, a silent promise that your life will become a living hell if you refuse. You are dismissed. You stand up, your legs feeling weak and rubbery. You nod and walk out of the office, back into the long, echoing corridor. You're no longer just a patient. You are a subject, an experiment, a problem to be solved with a knife. As you walk, your mind replays the doctor's words. You see the gleaming instruments. You feel the cold steel against your skin. You feel a profound, bottomless despair. It's a terror that's different from all the others. This is not about pain or humiliation. This is about erasure. This is about losing your mind, not to madness, but to medicine. You would be alive, but you would be gone. You've learned that you must make a choice. You can refuse and endure the unknown horrors that will surely follow, or you can agree and become a ghost in your own life. You are a human being, a person with hopes and dreams and fears, but you are also a prisoner, and your captors are offering you a way out, but the price is your very self. You think back to the straitjacket, to the hydrotherapy, to the jolt. You think of all the things they have taken from you, and now they want to take the last thing you have left, your mind. You're in a cage, and they are offering you a chance to be a quiet, unmoving, unthinking bird in that cage. The grim, quiet horror of the proposed lobotomy hangs in the air like a shroud. You've been given a reprieve, a few days to consider the doctor's recommendation, but it feels less like a choice and more like a slow, painful walk to the gallows. The threat hangs over you, a constant low-grade thrum of terror that makes it hard to breathe, hard to think. In the interim, you're thrown back into the daily grind, the monotonous rhythm of the asylum's routine. It is a strange sort of comfort, this return to the known. The physical exhaustion of scrubbing floors and folding laundry feels like a welcome distraction from the psychological weight of your impending decision. One morning, the routine shifts. Instead of being sent to the laundry or the gardens, you and a small group of other patients are led to a new room. It is a little brighter than the others. with a large window that looks out onto a small walled-in courtyard. The air in here smells of sawdust and paint, a sharp contrast to the familiar scent of carbolic acid. This, you're told, is where you will perform occupational therapy. The attendant in charge of this room is different from the others. He's a man in his late 40s with a kind, sad face and a missing finger on his left hand. He doesn't bellow or threaten. He simply points to a workbench covered in small wooden blocks and a few simple tools. "You will be making toys," he says, his voice a quiet, gentle rumble. "For the children's ward. They need new things to play with. A rather mainstream historical fact you're experiencing is that occupational therapy was a cornerstone of the moral treatment philosophy in asylums. The idea was that purposeful, productive work could help patients regain a sense of self-worth and connect with the world outside their illness. It was seen as a way to restore a patient's moral fibre and help them to function again. It was the counterpoint to the more brutal, punitive therapies like the straitjacket or the jolt. The task is simple but requires focus. You're given a small block of wood, a simple knife and a piece of sandpaper. Your job is to whittle the block into the shape of an animal. You choose a horse, a simple, four-legged shape you can remember. Your hands are clumsy at first, unused to this kind of delicate work. The knife slips, and you nick your thumb. The attendant comes over, his face etched with concern. He takes your hand, wraps the cut in a small piece of cloth, and then, without a word, shows you the proper way to hold the knife. He doesn't get angry, doesn't shout. He just teaches. You start again, your movements slower, more deliberate. The wood is stubborn at first, but with each carefully planned cut, the shape begins to emerge. The work is mesmerizing. Your mind, which has been a constant storm of fear and despair, is now focused on one simple, physical task. For the first time since you arrived, you are thinking about something other than your own suffering. You're thinking about the grain of the wood, the pressure of your thumb, the shape of the horse's leg. It's a strange, fleeting sense of peace. A quirky tidbit about this type of therapy is that in some asylums, the patients were so skilled that they would produce exquisite, high-quality goods, furniture, leather-bound books, even fine paintings, that were then sold to the public to help fund the institution. In a weird, roundabout way, you were contributing to your own imprisonment, but you were doing so with a purpose. It was a kind of grim partnership, a little grim humour you can appreciate. You were making a little money for the place that took your life, but at least you were making something beautiful. The room is quiet. The only sounds are the soft rasp of sandpaper on wood, the gentle scrape of a knife, and the rhythmic sound of a woman next to you humming a low, tuneless song as she sews a doll's dress. You find yourself watching her, her brow furrowed in concentration. She has a blank, vacant expression that you've come to associate with the most broken patients, but her hands are deft and precise. She is fully absorbed in her work. It occurs to you that this isn't about the toys or the dresses. It's about the work itself, about the act of creation in a place of destruction. The attendant, the kind-faced man, comes over and looks at your horse. He gives a small, approving nod. "You have a good hand for it," he says. The words feel like a rare, precious gift. It's the first time since you arrived that you've been praised for something you've done, rather than criticised for something you are. It gives you a little sliver of hope, a small pinprick of light in the vast, enveloping darkness. You're not cured. The fear of the lobotomy is still a heavy weight on your heart. But for a few hours each day, you're not just a patient. You're a craftsman. You're a creator. You're someone who can still make something from nothing. The act of creation is a small act of rebellion in a world that wants to erase you. It's a way of saying, I am still here. My mind, my hands, my spirit, they are still here. Historians still argue whether the moral treatment philosophy and the use of occupational therapy was truly effective in the long term, or if it was just a temporary distraction from the harsh realities of asylum life. For you, the answer is a little of both. The work doesn't change the fact that you are a prisoner, or that a terrible final solution is waiting for you just around the corner. But it does give you a temporary respite, a few precious hours of quiet, focused purpose. You realise that a cure may not be possible here, but survival is. And in this place, survival is not a given. It is a hard-won victory. You look down at the small wooden horse in your hand. Its edges are still a little rough, its legs a little crooked, but it is yours. It is a piece of you, a little bit of your spirit given form. And in a place where your identity is being systematically stripped away, that is a comfort more powerful than any medicine the doctor could ever prescribe. The art of survival, you realise, is to find the small things that are still yours and hold on to them with everything you have. The small wooden horse you carved is a secret victory, a tangible piece of proof that you still exist. You hide it under your straw mattress, a small, splintery talisman against the encroaching emptiness. But the brief respite of the occupational therapy room is just that, brief. The rest of the day is a return to the usual rhythm of the asylum, a rhythm that includes the ritual of the evening meal. You've learned to dread this meal more than any other. It is not about nourishment, it is about survival. You're led to the communal dining hall, a large draughty room with long bare tables and benches. The air is heavy with a strange sickly sweet smell that makes your stomach turn. It's the smell of boiled cabbage, but it's mixed with something else, something cloying and foul like old despair. The bowls of gruel from breakfast and lunch were a misery, but this evening's meal is a new kind of culinary horror. The attendants clatter through the hall, a noise that seems to echo the emptiness in your stomach carrying large steaming pots. They ladle a slop of something onto each tin plate. This is your dinner. It's a thick, grey stew, but you can't identify a single ingredient. You see a few pale, overcooked lumps of something that might once have been potato, and some wisps of green that were probably cabbage. But the rest is a formless, soupy mass. The taste is bland and oily, with a faint metallic tang from the tin plate. You're so hungry, so profoundly, bone-deep hungry, that you eat it anyway, forcing it down with a kind of grim desperation. You learn to eat quickly, not because you're enjoying it, but because you need to get it over with, before the smell and the taste become too much to bear. A mainstream historical fact is that the diet in many Victorian asylums was incredibly poor and often unsanitary. It was designed to be cheap and easy to produce in mass quantities, with little to no regard for nutritional taste. The food was often boiled to death, leaving it devoid of any flavour or nutrients. It was a kind of controlled malnutrition, just enough to keep the body alive, but not enough to sustain a healthy mind. It was a vicious cycle. The poor diet contributed to physical and mental weakness, which was then seen as a symptom of the madness and used to justify the patient's continued confinement. A little bit of dark humour, if you can stomach it. You've heard a few of the attendants joke that if the food doesn't cure you, it'll at least teach you gratitude for anything you ever get to eat again. You watch the other patients. Some eat with a kind of desperate animalistic ferocity, shoveling the food into their mouths as if they fear it will be taken away. Others sit and stare at their plates, the food untouched, their eyes vacant and unseeing. You wonder if they are too lost to even feel hunger. There is a man across from you, and he meticulously picks out every piece of cabbage from his stew, arranging them on the side of his plate in a neat little pile. You see a glint of defiance in his eyes, a small silent protest against the mind-numbing monotony of his life. It's a small, quiet act of rebellion, an assertion of control in a world where control has been stripped away. A quirky tidbit about asylum food is that in some institutions the kitchen was also the site of a strange kind of social experiment. The attendants would sometimes add strange ingredients to the food, or tell the patients that the food was made with something disgusting, like human hair or boiled rats, just to see their reaction. It was a kind of sick game, a cruel and twisted form of psychological torture designed to break the patient's will and make them question their own senses. You've heard whispers of this from the other patients, and as you stare at the dubious lumps in your stew, you can't help but wonder if there's a little grim joke hidden in your meal. The silence is the most unsettling part of the meal. The attendants stand at the end of the tables, their arms crossed, their faces stern. Any sound, any whisper, any cough is met with a sharp, angry command to quiet down. The dining hall is a place of forced community, where people are brought together but forbidden to connect. It's a place where you're made to feel your isolation most profoundly, surrounded by people who are just as lost as you are, but unable to share your misery. Historians still argue whether the poor diet in these asylums was a result of genuine ignorance about nutrition or a deliberate, calculated form of punishment and control. Was it a simple matter of cost-saving, or a way to ensure that patients were physically weak and therefore easier to manage? For you, The debate is irrelevant. The outcome is the same. Your body is growing weaker, your bones feel more brittle, and your stomach is a constant empty gnawing. The food doesn't nourish you, it simply keeps you from dying, and sometimes you can't help but wonder if that is a kindness or a curse. You finish your meal and stand up to leave. The attendants stand at the door, watching as you file out. You feel a strange sense of shame as you leave the dining hall, as if the shame of the food has attached itself to you, a mark of your degradation. You're a prisoner in a place of pain, and even the basic act of eating is a testament to your powerlessness. As you walk back to the ward, you look up at the grey, indifferent sky, and wonder if you will ever taste something real again. Something that tastes of home, of life, of a world that is not made of stew and despair. The gnawing hunger in your stomach has become a permanent companion, a physical manifestation of your mental state. You have learned the asylum's unwritten rules, the ones whispered in the dark corners of the ward: don't make eye contact, don't speak unless spoken to, and, most importantly, don't give the wardens a reason to notice you. The wardens, as the patients call them, are the heart of the asylum's punitive system. They are not doctors or nurses. They are brute force enforcers, and they rule with an arbitrary, often sadistic power. A mainstream historical fact is that the staff in Victorian asylums, particularly the attendants and wardens, were often poorly trained and poorly paid. They came from working-class backgrounds with no formal education in mental health. Their job was not to heal, but to maintain order, a task they accomplished through a mix of intimidation, physical force, and a complete lack of accountability. They were the absolute monarchs of their tiny, miserable kingdoms. The wardens patrol the wards and corridors with a kind of predatory patience. They are large, imposing men with thick, calloused hands and faces that seem to have forgotten how to smile. You have seen their cruelty up close. A young man, no more than 20, who had a habit of humming the same tuneless song over and over, was deemed disruptive. A warden came up to him, a scowl on his face, and simply slapped him across the face. A sharp, cracking sound that made the entire ward go silent. The boy stopped humming immediately, his eyes wide with a quiet, terrified understanding. This is the rule of the asylum. A small infraction is met with a swift and brutal response. There is no appeal, no one to complain to. The doctors and the superintendent are a world away, a distant, unreachable authority. The wardens are your immediate reality, the ones who hold your physical well-being in their hands. They are the arbiters of your fate, and their moods are as changeable and unpredictable as a storm. One of the wardens, a man with a thick, bristly moustache and a perpetually sneering lip, seems to take a particular interest in you. He watches you during your daily labour, his eyes following your movements. He's not looking for you to do a good job. He's looking for a reason to find fault. One afternoon, as you're scrubbing a section of floor, your hands raw and bleeding, he stops and points to a spot you missed. "Lazy," he says, his voice a low growl. "Are you trying to make more work for us? You're not here to rest." He kicks the bucket of water you're using, and the grimy liquid splashes across the floor, undoing all of your work. You flinch, but say nothing. You know that to protest is to invite a harsher punishment. He stands over you, his shadow a dark, suffocating presence, and forces you to re-scrub the entire section of floor, his sneering face a constant reminder of his power. There's a quirky tidbit about the methods of control used by these wardens. In some asylums, a favourite tool was a hobble chair or a tranquilizer chair. It was a chair with a high back and a system of leather straps that would bind the patient's arms and legs. It was a kind of portable straitjacket, a chair of quiet desperation. Sometimes they would even have a patient's head bound to the chair as well, forcing them to stare straight ahead for hours. This was not a treatment, it was a punishment, a way to break the will of a patient who was considered too difficult to manage. The most terrifying thing about the warden's control is that it's psychological as well as physical. They are masters of a kind of quiet sadism, a form of mental cruelty that is harder to heal than a slap. They use their power to humiliate, to demean, to strip you of your last vestiges of dignity. A woman who was a seamstress before she was committed was forced to sew her own clothes back together after they had been deliberately torn. She would work all day, only to have them ripped again the next morning. It was a slow, methodical form of mental torture, a way to show her that she had no control over her life, not even the smallest parts of it. Historians still argue whether the high levels of patient abuse in these institutions were a product of the warden's own inherent cruelty, or a result of a system that encouraged and even necessitated a brutal approach to patient management? Were they monsters, or were they just doing what the system demanded? You have no way of knowing, but you do know that the outcome is the same. The wardens are a constant, terrifying presence, a source of unyielding fear and pain. You learn to live with this fear, to move with a quiet, watchful grace. You learn to read the small, subtle signs of a warden's mood, the set of his jaw, the glint in his eye. You learn to anticipate their punishments, and, if possible, to avoid them. A small piece of grim humour you can find in this is that you're not just a patient anymore. You're a kind of professional survivor, a master of a very peculiar and very dangerous art form. The day ends, and you are locked in your cell. As the bolt slides home, you lean against the cold, unyielding door. You feel a profound sense of exhaustion, not just from the day's labour, but from the constant low-grade stress of being watched, of being in a state of constant low-grade terror. You're a prisoner in a place of torment, and your jailers are not just the walls and the doors. They are the men who patrol the halls, the men who hold your dignity in their hands and seem to delight in crushing it. You look up at the tiny barred window and you realise that freedom is not just about getting out of this building. It's about getting away from the people who hold all the power, the people who have made your life a living hell. The asylum is not just a place, it is a system of cruelty, and the wardens are its most brutal and efficient agents. You've survived the wardens, but their cruelty is a constant ambient noise, a background hum of fear that never truly goes away. You've become a master of disappearing, of being as unobtrusive as possible, and you've learned that your survival depends on understanding the unspoken rules of this new world. It's not just the staff who hold power here. There is a strange, sad social hierarchy among the patients themselves, a pecking order that you must learn to navigate if you want to make it through the day. At the bottom of this hierarchy are the incurables, the patients who have been here for years, their minds lost to their illness or, more likely, to the treatments. They are the ones who rock back and forth in the corner, who stare at the walls with vacant eyes, who are so far gone that they no longer seem to register the world around them. They are the untouchables, the ones the staff ignore and the other patients avoid. You see them as a kind of grim prophecy, a vision of what you might become if you stay here too long. A rather mainstream historical fact is that many Victorian asylums had separate wards for chronic or incurable patients, a physical manifestation of this social caste system. These wards were often the most underfunded and overcrowded, with patients receiving little to no treatment, simply left to languish. Above them are the disruptives, the patients who scream, who fight, who refuse to follow the rules. They are the ones who bear the brunt of the warden's cruelty, the ones who are constantly being put in straitjackets or tranquilizer chairs. Their defiance is a kind of bravery, a small, futile protest against a system that wants to erase them, but it's a bravery that comes at a terrible price. They are the ones who remind you that your silence, your compliance, is a choice, but a choice born of fear. Then there are the compliant, the vast majority of patients who, like you, have learned to adapt. They work, they eat, they sleep, and they keep their heads down. They are the survivors, the ones who have traded their individuality for a kind of fragile peace. You are one of them now. You've learned to recognise the other compliant ones, to share a silent look of understanding over a bowl of stew, to offer a small, almost imperceptible nod of solidarity. It is a community of misery, but it is a community nonetheless. A quirky tidbit about this social structure is that some patients, often those with a more grandiose or theatrical form of their illness, would appoint themselves as the king or queen of the ward. They would demand special treatment, boss other patients around, and even invent their own court and rules. The staff would sometimes indulge them, finding it a convenient way to keep a difficult patient occupied. It was a bizarre, almost comical parody of the world outside, a little bit of grim humour in a place devoid of it. You can see one of these self-proclaimed monarchs in the corner of the ward, a man with a tattered blanket draped over his shoulders like a royal cape, demanding that another patient fetch him a goblet of water, which is just his tin cup. Finally, at the top of this hierarchy are the sane. These are the patients who are, for all intents and purposes, perfectly normal. They are the ones who are committed for some social infraction, a disobedient wife, an inconvenient relative, a person with a family inheritance that someone else wanted. They are the most tragic of all, for they have not lost their minds. They have simply lost their freedom. They are the ones who feel the pain of their imprisonment most acutely, for they remember what it was like to be free. You find yourself drawn to one of these sane patients, a quiet woman with kind eyes named Eleanor. She was a teacher before she was committed, and her crime was simple. She dared to ask for an education for women that was equal to that of men. Her husband, embarrassed by her radical ideas, had her committed for political mania. You see her sometimes in the occupational therapy room, her hands working on a piece of embroidery, and you notice her movements are precise and deliberate, not the aimless motions of the truly lost. You manage to get a few minutes alone with her one day, and you ask her how she stays sane. She looks at you, a sad, knowing look in her eyes, and says, "You don't. You just learn to be a very convincing actor. You pretend you belong here. You pretend you are one of them." She explains that her greatest fear is not the straitjacket or the water, but the possibility that she will one day forget the person she was before, that the act will become the reality. Historians still argue whether the number of sane people in Victorian asylums was a common occurrence or a rare exception. Was the asylum a genuine place of last resort, or was it a convenient dumping ground for the unwanted and the inconvenient? For you, the answer is personal. Eleanor is living proof that a person can be perfectly sane and still be here, and that is a horrifying thought, because it means that your sanity is no guarantee of your safety. You realise that you are living in a society within a society, a world with its own rules, its own class system, and its own peculiar language. You're not just a patient, you're a citizen of the asylum. You're learning to speak its language, to understand its customs, and to survive its dangers. The hierarchy is not just about who holds power, it's about who has been here the longest, who has been broken the most, and who has the most to lose. And you know, with a profound and bone-deep sadness, that you have a very long way to fall. You look at the incurables, the ones who are so lost, and you whisper a silent prayer to whatever God might be listening that you never, ever become one of them. The day-to-day existence is a constant low-level negotiation with the rules of the asylum, the whims of the wardens, and the unspoken hierarchy of the patients. You've learned to be a survivor, a silent shadow in a world of torment. But even in this place of profound isolation, there is a flicker of humanity, a network of shared experience that exists just below the surface. It is a secret world, a language of glances and nods, of murmured words in the laundry room and quiet taps on the wall in the dead of night. This is the world of the whispers in the dark, the forbidden relationships and secret communications that form among the inmates. A mainstream historical fact is that despite the best efforts of asylum staff to isolate patients and prevent communication, a complex and often elaborate system of clandestine communication would inevitably develop. It was a testament to the human need for connection, a desperate reach for sanity in a place designed to drive you mad. These secret networks were a way for patients to share information, to warn each other of a warden's bad mood, or to simply share a moment of human empathy. You've learned to recognise the signs. A patient will drop a small piece of paper with a carefully scrawled note on it, a plea for help, or a simple question. Are you sane? The paper is then passed from hand to hand, a tiny illicit currency of hope. You see a woman with a perpetually vacant expression suddenly tap a coded message on the wall with her knuckles. It's a kind of Morse code, a secret language that you've been trying to decipher. A quirky tidbit about these codes is that some patients would develop incredibly complex systems of communication, using things like tapping, humming, or even a system of coded blinks to convey messages to one another. The sheer ingenuity of it is a kind of grim testament to the human spirit. One afternoon, in the laundry room, the woman who was forced to sew her own clothes back together, the one you'd seen silently protesting, drops a pin. As you help her pick it up, she whispers, "They say the food is made of dog meat. Be careful. It's a moment of startling, brutal honesty, a sudden intrusion of shared knowledge into your isolated world." The information is terrifying, but the act of sharing it, the simple fact that she is trying to warn you, is a profound act of kindness. This is how the whispers work. A piece of information, a bit of truth, passed from person to person, a secret that binds you together, a little bit of dark humour if you can find it. It's not just a prison, it's a sort of very sad, very lonely underground railroad. You find yourself drawn into this network. You learn to interpret the small, subtle signals. A quick glance at a warden's back means it's safe to speak. A hand placed on a specific spot on the wall means a message is coming. You find a note slipped under your bed, a simple drawing of a bird in a cage, a picture of a shared misery that needs no words. You feel a strange kind of solidarity with these people, a sense of belonging you haven't felt since you arrived. You're not alone, you're one of them, and they are one of you. This new connection, however, is a dangerous one. If the wardens were to discover your secret communication, the punishment would be swift and severe. The risk is high, but the reward is higher. This is a battle for your soul, and your soul needs connection to survive. You see a man, his face a landscape of scars, silently tap out a message to another patient. The other patient nods, a small knowing nod. They have a shared secret, a shared misery, a shared hope. It is a kind of shared therapy, a kind of undoctor-sanctioned healing that happens in the shadows, far from the prying eyes of the staff. You learn that there is a name for your kind in the asylum. You're a fellow traveller. It's a term used to describe those who are sane, or mostly sane, but have found themselves trapped here. The fellow travellers share a special kind of bond, a kind of unspoken agreement to look out for one another. They share information, they share secrets, they share a desperate hope that they will one day get out. A rather grim kind of humour, you suppose, to think of yourself as a kind of political prisoner in a place of madness. Historians still argue whether these patient-run networks were a genuine threat to the asylum's authority or a harmless coping mechanism for patients. Was it a form of rebellion or a form of self-preservation? For you, the answer is simple. It's both. The act of sharing a secret, of connecting with another human being in a place of such profound isolation, is a powerful act of rebellion. It is an act that says, "You have not broken me. You have not erased me. I am still here, and I am not alone." The whispers in the dark are a kind of quiet rebellion, a low, persistent hum of humanity that the asylum can never truly silence. You're no longer just a prisoner. You're a conspirator. You're no longer a victim. You're a survivor, and you're no longer alone. The sound of the bolt clicking in your door at night no longer feels like a finality. It feels like the start of a new conversation, a quiet tap on the wall, a whisper in the dark, a message that says, "I am here. Are you?" The whispers have become a lifeline, a fragile web of connection that stretches across the wards. You've learned the rhythms of the asylum, the blind spots of the wardens, the times when the guards change shifts. You've come to know the geography of the place, the back hallways that are rarely patrolled, the small, dusty utility closets where a person might hide for a minute or two. This knowledge, born of desperation and observation, has sparked a new, terrifying idea in your mind: escape. It's a fool's errand, a plan hatched from desperation, but the alternative, the grim choice of the lobotomy, is a fate you refuse to accept. You begin to plot. You learn that one of the outside gates, the one that leads to the asylum's vast unkempt vegetable gardens, is sometimes left unlocked for a few minutes while a supply wagon is being unloaded. It's a small window, a tiny fleeting moment of opportunity. The other patients, your fellow travellers, are your accomplices. The quiet woman, Eleanor, is your lookout. The man who taps on the wall, a former sailor named Thomas, is your navigator. He has an uncanny sense of direction and seems to know the layout of the asylum better than the wardens themselves. A mainstream historical fact is that escape attempts from Victorian asylums, while often unsuccessful, were not uncommon. Patients, driven by desperation, would try to sneak out, to climb the walls, to simply walk out the front door in the hope of reaching home. These attempts were often seen by the staff as a symptom of the patient's madness, proof that they were irrational and dangerous. The asylum was a fortress, and a person's desire to leave it was seen as an illogical and paranoid delusion. The plan is simple. You will wait for the supply wagon to arrive, and as the guards are distracted, you and a small group of others will make a break for the back gate. You will run through the gardens and disappear into the night. It sounds simple, but you know that in this place nothing is simple. The night of the attempt arrives. The air is cold and damp, and a thin, miserable rain is falling, a kind of grim blessing. It will obscure your movements and keep the guards inside, out of the weather. You and your small group of co-conspirators are in the main hall waiting. You feel a knot of fear and excitement in your stomach, a feeling you haven't felt since you arrived. It's the feeling of being alive. The wagon arrives, its wheels grinding on the wet cobblestones. The guards, their faces turned away from you, begin to unload the crates. Thomas gives you the signal, a subtle nod of his head. This is it. You move as a single silent unit, a ghost convoy of hope. You're at the back of the hall near a small, inconspicuous door that Thomas says leads to the back gardens. You slip through it, and the cold, wet air hits your face, a shocking, wonderful sensation. You're outside. You run, your feet splashing in the puddles. You can feel your heart pounding in your chest, a frantic drumbeat of freedom. You can hear the voices of the guards behind you, muffled and distant, but they are still there. You're a shadow, a blur in the night. You make it to the back gate. It's unlocked. You feel a surge of pure, unadulterated triumph. You're a foot away from a different life. A quirky tidbit about these escapes is that patients would sometimes leave small notes or objects behind, a kind of message to the ones they left behind, a way of saying, "I made it." There is hope. You look at the gate, at the small rusted latch, and you feel the weight of this moment. But just as you reach for the latch, a hand grabs your shoulder. A warden. He must have seen you, a single figure breaking away from the group. You struggle, but his grip is like iron. He slams you against the wall, the back of your head hitting the cold, wet stone with a sickening thud. The world goes black for a second, and then comes back in a dizzying, kaleidoscopic blur. The other escapees have disappeared into the dark. You are alone. You are caught. The consequences are immediate and brutal. You are dragged back inside, not to your ward, but to a small, dark room with a single barred window high on the wall. The room smells of old plaster and fear. The warden doesn't say a word. He simply locks you in. You hear the bolt slide home, a final, unyielding sound that seems to mock your earlier hope. You're left alone in the dark. The escape attempt, which was meant to be your liberation, has become your new, more profound imprisonment. You're now a marked patient, a troublemaker, a threat. You sit in the dark for what feels like an eternity. The silence is absolute, a vacuum where your thoughts should be. The warden comes back and he is not alone. The doctor, your tormentor, is with him. He looks at you, his face a mask of cold disappointment. "I see your hysteria is more advanced than I thought," he says, his voice devoid of emotion. "The lobotomy will have to be moved up." He doesn't ask you what you were trying to do. He doesn't ask you why you tried to escape. He simply assumes that your desire for freedom is a symptom of your madness, a delusion to be excised. Historians still argue whether the asylum staff truly believed that a patient's desire to escape was a symptom of their illness, or if it was a convenient fiction to justify their brutal control. Was it a matter of clinical opinion or a matter of social control? For you, the answer doesn't matter. The result is the same. The one thing that made you feel sane, your desire to be free, has become the very thing that will condemn you. You're no longer a compliant patient. You're no longer a part of the quiet conspiratorial network of the fellow travellers. You're an example. Your punishment is a lesson to the others. The asylum has tightened its grip on you. Your spirit, which was soaring just a few minutes ago, is now a crushed, broken thing. You're a caged bird and they have just clipped your wings, and you can't help but wonder if you will ever fly again. The escape attempt was a brutal lesson, a high-stakes gamble that cost you dearly. The lobotomy, once a distant, terrifying possibility, is now a looming certainty. You've been returned to your cell, a place of even more profound isolation, and the food, already a misery, is now rationed even more severely. You're a marked woman, an example to the others. The whispers have stopped. The other patients look at you with a mixture of fear and pity, a new kind of distance in their eyes. You're a pariah, a living testament to the futility of resistance. One afternoon, as you lie on your hard straw mattress, staring up at the cracked, uneven ceiling, the bolt on your door slides open. It's not the warden. It's a young nurse you've only seen once or twice. A kind-faced girl with sad eyes who always seems to look at you with a kind of quiet, helpless empathy. She slips a single, folded piece of paper into your hand. "A letter," she whispers, her voice a low, hurried breath. "It came for you." And then she is gone, the door locked behind her. The paper is coarse, and the ink is smudged, but the handwriting is familiar. It's your mother's. You unfold it with a shaking hand. The words are a jumble of emotions, worry, hope, and a deep, profound confusion. She writes about the family home, about the garden, about the way the sun streams through the parlour window in the morning. She talks about your brother and how he has taken up a new trade, a kind of sad news because you have always been a little closer to him than anyone else. She tells you about your father and how he misses you, but is so glad that you are getting the help you need. She asks you if the doctors are kind, if the food is good, if the place is as wonderful as the doctor promised it would be. A mainstream historical fact is that for many patients in Victorian asylums, contact with their families was severely limited or, in some cases, completely cut off. The families, often advised by doctors, were told that it was better for the patient to separate themselves from their past life in order to fully recover. These letters, when they came, were often filtered, read by the superintendent to make sure they didn't contain anything that might agitate the patient. Your mother's letter, you realise, has been read. It is a curated message, a lie wrapped in the comforting cloak of family love. You feel a profound sense of despair. She doesn't know. She doesn't know what this place is, what they've done to you. The letter is a lie, a cruel, bitter falsehood. She talks about your brother's new trade, but you can't remember what he was doing before. She talks about the house, but the details are fuzzy, a distant memory from a world that seems to no longer exist. The asylum has not just separated you from your family, it has separated you from your own memories of them. A quirky tidbit about these letters is that in some asylums, the letters that patients wrote back to their families were often destroyed. The doctors would tell the families that the patient was not yet ready to write, or that their writing was incoherent. It was another way of isolating the patient, of ensuring that they had no contact with the outside world, no way to plead for their freedom. You look at your mother's letter, and you realise that your silence has been misinterpreted, that she thinks you're just too sick to write. It's a cold, hard irony, a little grim humour in this new world of yours, that your very absence is being used to prove your madness. You try to write a letter back. You sit on your hard mattress and try to remember the words for I am not mad. Please help me. But the words won't come. The shock of your capture, the terror of the lobotomy, the profound despair of your isolation, it has all combined to form a kind of mental block. You try to think of a phrase, a single sentence that would get past the superintendent's watchful eye, but you know there is no such thing. Any mention of the guards, of the treatments, of the horror, will be seen as agitation, as proof that you are still unstable. You realise that your family, for all their love and worry, has forgotten the person you were. They have replaced her with a phantom, a person who is sick and in need of help. You are a ghost, a memory. You try to remember your father's face, his laugh, the way he would hold your hand. But the memories are like old photographs, faded and sepia-toned, a little blurred around the edges. This is the ultimate act of cruelty. The asylum has not just taken your freedom, it has taken your history. Historians still argue whether the isolation of patients from their families was a deliberate malevolent act on the part of the asylums, or if it was a well-intentioned but misguided effort to help them. Was it a form of clinical therapy or a form of social control? For you, the answer doesn't matter. The result is the same. You are utterly, completely alone. You fold the letter and slide it back under your mattress, a secret to be kept in the dark. It is a reminder of the world you have lost, of the life that is going on without you. It is a reminder that you're not just a prisoner, you are a forgotten person, and in this place being forgotten is the cruelest form of punishment of all. It is a slow, methodical erasure, a process of stripping you of everything that makes you, well, you. And you can't help but wonder if, in the end, it's not the lobotomy that will take your mind, but the loneliness. The asylum is not just a place. It is a profound and unyielding form of forgetting, and your family unknowingly is a part of it. The letter from your mother is a ghost in your pocket, a reminder of a life that is no longer yours. You are trapped in a profound and suffocating loneliness. Your every action, your every thought, a reminder of your impending fate. But even in this state of quiet despair, a new kind of social fabric emerges from the shadows. In the dead of night, after the wardens have made their final rounds and the last gaslights have been dimmed, a low hum of conversation begins. The patients, your fellow prisoners, begin to share their secrets, not of their past lives, but of this place. They are telling the asylum's grim folklore, the stories of this building, the legends that have sprung up from its soil of sorrow and madness. A mainstream historical fact you're hearing in whispers is that asylums, like any other institution with a long and dark history, developed their own internal mythology. Patients would pass down stories of strange occurrences, of mysterious disappearances, of a place's haunted past. These stories, whether true or not, served a purpose. They were a way of making sense of the madness, of giving a narrative to the inexplicable horrors. They were a kind of shared therapy, a way of giving a voice to the silent terrors of the night. You listen as a frail, elderly woman, her face a map of quiet suffering, tells a story about the ghost of the Green Ward. She says that a woman who was committed for a broken heart, a girl who had lost her love, now wanders the halls, a ghostly wail her only sign. The story is simple, but it has a kind of power. It's a way of saying that the pain of the heart, the pain that led so many people to this place, is so profound it can't be contained even by death. The man who taps on the wall, Thomas, the former sailor, has his own stories. He whispers of a secret underground tunnel that leads from the asylum to a nearby river. He says that in the early days, some of the patients managed to escape through it, their bodies never found. You know logically that this is probably a fabrication, a comforting lie, but the idea of a secret passage, a hidden door to freedom, is a powerful one. It's a story of hope, a whisper in the dark that says that escape, however unlikely, is still possible. A quirky tidbit about this folklore is that it often mixed with the actual terrible events of the asylum. Patients would tell stories about a doctor who experimented on patients in the dead of night, and it was often a veiled reference to the cruel and unscientific treatments that were actually happening. They would tell a story about a ghost who was forced to take a cold bath, and it was a way of talking about the hydrotherapy without having to say the name out loud. It was a kind of secret language, a way of talking about the trauma without having to confront it directly. A little bit of grim humour, if you can find it. The asylum wasn't just a prison. It was a ghost story factory, and you were its newest star. The most terrifying of these stories comes from the incurables, the ones who are so lost they can only communicate in fragments. You hear a story about a black dog that comes in the night, a silent, menacing shadow that stalks the wards, leaving a trail of bodies in its wake. The story is told in hushed, terrified whispers. You realise that the black dog isn't a supernatural creature. It's a metaphor for the lobotomy, the silent, terrifying surgical procedure that leaves a patient a mindless shell. It's a way of telling the story of a lobotomy without having to use the word. It's a story of quiet horror, a story that says your mind can be taken from you, not by madness, but by an indifferent black-eyed monster. Historians still argue whether these stories were a symptom of the patient's madness, a form of delusion, or if they were a legitimate form of cultural expression, a way of building a shared history and identity in a place that wanted to erase it. For you, the answer is clear. They are a kind of truth. They are a way of making the unexplainable explainable, of giving a form to a formless, all-encompassing terror. The stories are also a kind of warning. They are a warning about the doctors, about the wardens, about the treatments. They are a warning to hold on to your sanity, to not become one of the lost souls who haunt the halls. You're not a ghost, not yet. But the stories of the asylum's folklore are a reminder that a person can become one, that a person can be so broken that their spirit leaves their body, leaving only an empty shell behind. As the stories fade with the coming of dawn, you are left with a new understanding of this place. It is not just a building, it is a monument to human misery. It has its own history, its own legends, its own ghosts. And you are not just a patient, you are a part of that history. You are an inmate in a living, breathing ghost story, a story that is being written in the quiet, desolate corridors of the night. The stories are a part of your new reality, a part of the asylum's unwritten curriculum. You are learning to read them, and you're learning to fear them. And you know, with a bone-deep certainty, that you are one day going to be a part of them. The asylum is not just a place, it is a repository of sorrow, and you are a new and deeply unfortunate addition. The stories of the asylum's folklore have become a part of your mental landscape, a grim mythology of a place where madness and cruelty are indistinguishable. You're living in a purgatory of your own making, a place where time has lost its meaning. You're no longer counting the days, but the cycles of the sun, the slow, imperceptible shifts of the seasons. The weeks and months have blurred together, a long, indistinguishable stretch of grey. You've forgotten what a normal life feels like, what it was to simply wake up in your own bed, to drink a hot cup of tea, to have a conversation that isn't a battle for your sanity. a mainstream historical fact you're experiencing now is a profound and terrifying form of psychological erosion. Chronic institutionalization in Victorian asylums was a common fate. Patients were admitted with the vague hope of a cure, but in reality many were destined to live out their lives within the asylum's walls. The monotony, the lack of stimulation, and the brutal reality of the place would wear down a person's spirit, leaving them a shell of who they once were. The slow, methodical march of time was a more powerful tool of control than any straitjacket or hydrotherapy. You find yourself doing things you never thought you would do. You hum to yourself, a tuneless, repetitive sound that you can't seem to stop. You rock back and forth on your bed, a movement that once seemed so strange and terrifying in others, but now feels like a natural, comforting rhythm. You see your reflection in a polished brass plate on the wall, and the person you see is a stranger, a gaunt, pale creature with eyes that are too big and too old for your face. You're no longer just a prisoner, you're a product of your environment. You're becoming a part of the asylum, one of the lost souls who haunt its corridors. It's a kind of grim humour, you suppose, that they promise to cure your madness, and in doing so they are manufacturing a new, more profound one. The man who taps on the wall, Thomas, is gone. You don't know where he went. He just wasn't there one day. You're too afraid to ask, too afraid of the answer. Was he caught? Did he die? Or did he just become one of the incurables, so lost that he was moved to a different ward? His absence is a physical weight, a gaping hole in your small conspiratorial world. You try to tap on the wall, a simple, "Are you there?" But there is no response. The silence is a crushing weight, a reminder that your only connection to the outside world has been severed. A quirky tidbit about this period of institutionalization is the strange, often elaborate rituals that patients would invent to pass the time. A woman you know, a former teacher who now has the memory of a goldfish, spends her days meticulously folding her uniform in a specific, intricate pattern. If you were to ask her why she does it, she wouldn't be able to tell you. It's a ritual without meaning, a form of self-soothing in a world that offers no comfort. Another man spends his days meticulously counting the cracks in the wall, a task he has been doing for years. These are not acts of madness, they are acts of desperation, a way of giving a form to a life that has lost all form. You find yourself drawn to these rituals, to the quiet, repetitive tasks that give a form to the shapeless, endless days. You begin to fold your blanket in a specific, precise way, and the act of doing so gives you a small, fleeting sense of control. You are a prisoner, yes, but you are a prisoner who folds her blanket just so. It's a small, pitiful act of defiance, but it is a defiance nonetheless. The asylum is a world with its own time, its own slow, methodical clock. It's a world where a day can feel like a year and a year can feel like a day. You have been here for a long time, but you don't know how long. You have no mirror, no clock, no calendar. You only have the slow, relentless erosion of your own sanity. You try to remember your name, your real name, the one you were born with, and you can. But it feels strange, like a word from a foreign language, a name that belongs to a person you no longer know. Historians still argue whether the long-term institutionalization of patients in Victorian asylums was a form of treatment or a form of social warehousing. Were the doctors and superintendents trying to cure these people, or were they just trying to get them off the streets, to hide them away from a society that couldn't or wouldn't deal with them? For you, the answer is a little of both. The asylum is a kind of living tomb, a place where people are not buried but are simply forgotten. You are a ghost, a shadow of the person you once were. You are a living testament to the slow, relentless cruelty of time, a time that marches forward in an unyielding, merciless rhythm. The asylum has not broken you with a single dramatic act of violence. It has broken you with 1,000 tiny, imperceptible acts of cruelty, a slow, methodical erasure that has left you an empty shell. You look at the other patients, their vacant eyes, their strange, repetitive movements. You know, with a bone-deep certainty, that they are a vision of your future. And in this place, the most terrifying thing of all is the knowledge that the future, like the past, is a slow, relentless descent into nothingness. The slow, relentless march of time has left you a stranger to yourself. You're no longer the person who walked in here, full of fear and indignation. You are now a part of this place, a quiet, compliant ghost in a body that no longer feels like your own. The lobotomy, once a terrifying threat, has become a kind of quiet inevitability, a final surrender. You no longer fight it in your mind. You simply wait for it, the way you wait for the next plate of thin, watery stew. But even in this state of profound resignation, a new, strange word begins to be whispered in the corridors, a word you haven't heard since you arrived. Reform. A mainstream historical fact you're hearing about is the beginnings of the mental health reform movement in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It was a slow, agonizing process, but it was happening. There were new ideas circulating, new philosophies about the treatment of the mentally ill. The moral treatment philosophy, which focused on work and fresh air, was giving way to the idea that mental illness was a medical condition, not a moral failing. The public, too, was beginning to turn a more critical eye on the asylums, thanks to the shocking stories of journalists who went undercover to expose the brutal conditions. Nellie Bly, a groundbreaking journalist, famously feigned madness to get inside a New York asylum, and her resulting book, 10 Days in a Madhouse, brought the horrors of institutionalization to a wider audience. The whispers begin with a patient who has been here for a long time, a quiet, middle-aged man who spends his days staring out the window. He tells you that there is a new doctor who has arrived, a young man who talks about things like dignity and patient rights. He talks about the possibility of new treatments, of more humane conditions. He says that the doctors are beginning to talk about the need for more humane practices. You don't believe it at first. You've heard these promises before, and they have always been a lie. But then you see a small, subtle change. The food, for one, is slightly better. It is still tasteless, still meagre, but you can see that it's made of something real now, not just a strange grey slop. You hear the new doctor, a young man with a face that looks too kind for this place, talking to a warden. He's not shouting or threatening. He's speaking in a low, reasonable voice. He's asking the warden to use less physical force, to try and talk to the patients, to not resort to the straitjacket at the first sign of agitation. The warden, who seems to have a deep and abiding love for the straitjacket, scowls and says, "They don't understand reason, sir." But the doctor just looks at him, his gaze steady and unwavering. It is a small thing, but it is a thing you have never seen before. A man with authority telling a warden to be kind. A quirky tidbit about this new wave of reform is that it was often driven by a few passionate, forward-thinking doctors who were pushing back against the old established guard. They were seen as radicals, as dreamers. They were often ridiculed by their colleagues, who saw their ideas as naive and impractical. The very idea that a person's madness could be cured by kindness was a radical one. A little bit of grim humour, you suppose, to think of a kind word as a form of rebellion against a system built on cruelty. You feel a flicker of something you haven't felt in a long time. Hope. It's a small, fragile thing, a tiny flame in the vast darkness of your despair. You don't dare to believe it, not fully. You've been here too long, seen too much. But the hope is there, a quiet, persistent whisper in your heart. You see a woman who was a disruptive, a woman who was often in a straitjacket being given a sketchbook and a set of paints. She doesn't scream or fight. She sits quietly, her brow furrowed in concentration, and she begins to draw. Her hands, which were once so full of a frantic, panicked energy, are now quiet and steady. The change is not a cure, but it is a kind of peace. Historians still argue whether the early mental health reforms were truly a product of a new, more enlightened understanding of mental illness, or if they were simply a way for a society that was increasingly embarrassed by its asylums to make them more palatable. Were they a genuine attempt at healing, or a superficial rebranding of an old broken system? For you, the answer doesn't matter. The result is the same. The asylum is changing. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, but it is changing. The hope is there. A small, fragile thing, a tiny flame in the vast darkness of your despair. You look at the woman with the sketchbook, at the man who is no longer humming, and you feel a profound sense of relief. The lobotomy, your impending fate, seems a little less certain now. It's still a possibility, a sword hanging over your head, but it is not a certainty. There is a new world on the horizon, a world that is beginning to understand that madness is not a crime, that it is a sickness, and that kindness is as important as any medicine. You are not cured, not yet, but you're no longer alone in your despair. You're a part of a quiet, slow-moving revolution, a revolution that is trying to bring a little bit of light into a very, very dark world. And for the first time in a very long time, you can feel a faint, fragile sense of a future that might, just might, be free. The glimmer of hope, that small, fragile flame, has been growing. The changes are slow, but they are undeniable. A new kind of quiet has settled over the asylum, not the oppressive silence of fear, but a quiet that feels more like a kind of truce. The food is more palatable, the wardens are less brutal, and the new young doctor's influence is a slow, steady wave of change. The conversations in the ward are no longer just about the asylum's grim folklore. They are about the outside world, about the possibility of a life beyond these walls. You find yourself talking to Eleanor again, the teacher who was committed for her radical ideas. She tells you that she's heard a rumour about a new law, something about patient advocacy. You try not to get your hopes up, but it is a losing battle. Hope, once a forgotten emotion, is now a constant nagging presence. Then, one day, your name is called. Not for a treatment, not for a punishment, but for a meeting with the new doctor. He is sitting at the superintendent's desk, which seems to have been rearranged to look more like a study and less like a throne. He smiles at you, a real genuine smile, and the warmth of it is a shock to your system. He tells you that your case has been reviewed. He says that your symptoms have subsided, that you have shown a remarkable capacity for compliance, and that your long-term institutionalization is no longer necessary. He says the words you have been waiting to hear for a very long time. You are being discharged. The words feel like a dream, like a beautiful, impossible lie. You feel a profound and overwhelming sense of relief, but it is mixed with something else, a strange, profound sense of terror. You're being released back into the world, a world you no longer know, a world that has, in a way, forgotten you. A mainstream historical fact is that the process of discharging a patient from a Victorian asylum was often an abrupt and disorienting experience. A patient might be released with no money, no home, and no family to return to. The asylum, for all its horrors, had been your home. It had been your world. And now you are being cast out, not into a world of freedom, but into a world of profound and terrifying uncertainty. You are given back your old clothes. They are ill-fitting now, too large on your gaunt frame, and they smell of mothballs and old dust. The nurse hands you a small worn leather bag with a few shillings in it, a gift from the superintendent for your good behaviour. The goodbye is brief, a quiet exchange of words that feels completely out of place. The nurse gives you a small, sad smile, a look that says she's both happy for you and terrified for you. You walk out of the asylum, through the front doors and into the light of the sun. The light is blinding, a sharp, physical pain that makes you wince. The air smells of rain and wet earth and something else, something wild and free. It smells like life. But as you walk down the long gravel driveway, you feel a profound sense of dislocation. The world is too loud, too bright, too fast. The people in the street look at you, their eyes filled with a curious mix of pity and fear. They can see the asylum on you, a stain on your spirit, a mark of your time in the madhouse. You're no longer just a person. You're a survivor, a ghost, a living testament to the asylum's horrors. The asylum has left a mark on you, a psychological scar that will never truly heal. A quirky tidbit about this post-asylum life is that many former patients, unable to find work or reconnect with their families, would wander the streets, often begging or living as transients. The asylum, which was supposed to be a place of healing, had in many cases destroyed a person's ability to function in the real world. The asylum had not cured them. It had simply broken them in a different way. A little bit of grim humour, you suppose, to think of yourself as a kind of broken toy, a human being who can no longer function in the world for which she was made. You find yourself walking to your old family home. You don't know why. It is a part of you, a place in your memory that is still whole. You get to the house, and it is the same. The windows are clean, the garden is well tended, and the smell of dinner, a rich, savoury smell, is coming from the kitchen. You knock on the door, your heart a frantic drum against your ribs. Your mother opens the door. She looks at you, a look of profound, overwhelming confusion on her face. She doesn't recognise you at first. The asylum has taken too much from you. The months, the years of malnutrition, of fear, of trauma. It has changed you. She finally recognises you, and she pulls you into a tearful, suffocating embrace. But even as she holds you, you can feel a kind of distance between you, a chasm that you can't seem to bridge. She asks you about your time at the asylum, and you try to explain, but the words are too big, too terrible. You can't tell her about the straitjacket or the food or the whispers in the dark. She wouldn't understand. She has her own version of the asylum, the one the doctor promised her. The asylum has not just separated you from your family, it has separated you from your own truth. Historians still argue whether a person can ever truly recover from the trauma of long-term institutionalization in a Victorian asylum. Was the damage irreparable, or could a person with time and kindness slowly heal? For you, the answer is a little of both. You are free, yes, but you're also a prisoner of your own mind, a mind that has been shaped and scarred by the asylum. You're a ghost, a survivor, a living testament to the slow, methodical cruelty of a system that was meant to heal, but only knew how to break. You're a long way from home, but you're also a long way from the person you once were. You're on your own now, in a world that you no longer know, with a past that is a ghost in your mind. You are free. But as you look at your reflection in a shop window, you realise that you have carried the asylum out with you. It is a part of you now, a scar on your soul. You have a long road ahead, a road that is not about healing, but about learning to live with the person you have become. And you can't help but wonder if, in the end, the asylum was a kind of cure after all. A cure for the person you were, the one they saw as hysterical and melancholic, and a new, more terrifying kind of illness, one that has left you forever a prisoner in your own mind. You are out, yes, but you will never truly be free. The streetlights begin to hum, a soft, reassuring sound against the darkening sky. The day is finally giving up its light, and the world is settling down for the night. You're no longer in that vast, unforgiving building. You're in your own home, in your own bed, and the only sounds are the quiet whispers of the night. The shadows in the corner are just shadows, and the creaks in the floor are just the creaks in the floor. The past is a distant echo now, a story that you have lived through, a story that is now just a memory. So close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let the darkness of the night, not the asylum, envelop you. The story is over, and your journey is done. The asylum, for all its horror, is no longer your home. It is a part of your past, a dark, terrible chapter that you have now closed. You are safe, you are warm, you are free. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together.